All right, again, thank you for joining.
I hope you heard my introduction, so I'll not repeat it again. I also understand from Deepak about the requirement and the expectation that was there. So Deepak, if there is anything that you can let me know.
Okay, sounds good, sir.
All right. So it's a quick introduction session to help you understand what we would be discussing. So the training is for QlikSense. We would be, QlikSense is a business intelligence platform, as I'm sure you would have already understood because you're making an evaluation for an organization and making a purchase for it. So QlikSense has been deployed across 40,000 customers worldwide. It has been greatly accepted as an enterprise business intelligence solution. So that's where QlikSense projects span between like couple of thousand of users to a lakh of users across various organizations that I have seen. The main thing that QlikSense flies or has been famous is for the associative engine, of course the in-memory technology. It is fast, and while these two things, associative engine and in-memory technology, are a boon for the end user, but for IT, it helps them to deploy this faster, deploy it to their users, and give the business users the power to make decisions quickly. It has self-service, guided, embedded capabilities where users can create their own reports, slice and dice data, or if in the end, if the IT team wants to embed this into any other solution, they can do that. It can integrate to multiple data sources. So when I say this, it is not connecting to multiple sources and getting data. It is basically getting data from multiple sources at one time in one single application and giving you the whole story out of the data. You can associate a lot of data sets and understand the entire story present in your data from end to end. And of course, it can work with any kind of data source, like any large data set, multiple data sets. It can address the challenge of volume, variety, and velocity of data. And the reason QlikSense became famous, or Qlikview, in fact, which was the earlier product, both became famous, was because it moved the entire BI capabilities out of the report-centric architecture to a business discovery architecture, where users earlier were more focused on getting reports from IT team. Now they have capability to create their own reports and charts without having to build anything, without having to wait for the results from the IT team or going back. Now, instead of a long loop, now it is a closed, it is on demand insights at the point of decision making for the end users. QlikSense carries, like Qlikview, QlikSense also carries a very simple architecture. It's a server client architecture. You would have a QlikSense server. The databases can be anywhere. The data source can be anything. You connect to the data source, bring in the data, create the applications on the server, and publish it to the user. Now, in QlikSense, you don't need a desktop client or anything else. Even the development is on the server. So even the developer would access it on the browser and do the development. So ideally, there are four kinds of different users that would access a QlikSense server. One is the consumer, who is the end user, who would just be consuming data, like slicing, dicing, filtering data. A contributor who would have the access to slice and dice data. He would not have access to add data to the application. He can actually create his own sheets, charts, and graphs and understand the data, but he can't create it from scratch. A developer is a person who would create from scratch, who would be creating the right from connecting to the data source, bringing the data, creating the data model, to publishing it. Developer would be doing it. And of course, Qlik admin also is through a browser, who would be managing the entire site. So at any given point, QlikSense is accessed by any kind of user through a browser. So that makes it easy. You can access it through any HTML5 compatible browser. That could be on a desktop, laptop, or a mobile device that you would have. So interestingly, if you are accessing it through a tablet, you can do the development also through a tablet. So that the entire deployment of QlikSense is responsive in nature, so that makes it easier for you to access on any device and do your work without having dependency on a system or a machine. So that's about QlikSense. So in QlikSense, there are 3 to 4 kinds of different file systems that are there. One is QVF, QVD, QVX, and there's another file type called QVS. QVF is the QlikSense file system. QlikSense file. Now this file contains everything. Right? This is where we would be working. If you're working with QlikSense, this is what a file is created. You start off with creating one application. You call this in different terminologies. You can call this as a file. You can call this as an application. So the various people have various ways to address it. You call it as application or a document. Right. So one application or a document .qvf file is where we would be doing any work. So if you're connecting to data source, first we create a QVF, connect to data source, bring the data source, process it, create. So QVF will have a data model, script in it, and this is the file that will have the data in it also. And once you put all these 3, this is the file that you'd publish and the users would access. So wherever users access, they access a QVF and they do their work. Now, the advantage of QlikSense is it's an app-based model kind of a deployment. So you can create multiple QVFs. You can create different QVFs for.
Hey, Azra, we lost you.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So I was telling you can create different QVFs for different use cases. So if you have a certain use case for finance, HR, or if you have a very you want to combine 2-3 use cases and create a QVF, you can do that. So a QVF is a file which is the main file. Now once you have QVF, this QVF is the file which actually goes into the memory of the RAM. So when we say in memory, this is the file that goes into in memory. So whenever you create a QVF, you publish it to the end user access it. In fact, this QVF is in the memory. Whatever size of the QVF is what you would end up using the RAM for. So if the QVF is 100 MB file size, then there is a mathematics to that. So you need a proportionate RAM to manage 100 MB of file. So of course, if there are users more, so the RAM would depend on the number of users and the file size that we would be talking about. Now, since this QVF file goes into in-memory, it is always a truncate and load kind of a scenario. So whenever you refresh a QVF, it will drop off the memory, reload the entire data, and then it goes back into memory. So that's the product architecture. In that scenario, what happens is not always you can query entire data set from your transactional system. So that becomes a challenge. And of course, when we talk about BI, and if you have to refresh data continuously from transaction system, that's a wrong. I mean, that's a challenging methodology. In small use cases, yes, you can do that, but in larger use cases where the data is very large, it becomes a challenge. That's where Qlik also introduced their storage format called QVD. So this is a pure storage format. It's nothing but a flat file storage on Windows platform. Right? You can store these files anywhere. The interesting part is it compresses data almost 1:10 times. Right? So the compression is purely on cardinality. So if your data is cardinal, the cardinality in the data is very high, then the compression is less. If there is very much repetitive, then the data gets compressed almost 1:10 times. So this is purely an intermediate storage format. So you get the data from your database, store it in QVDs, and you can use it. you can use it, call it into QVFs. Why, how, what is the advantage, we'll discuss as we move forward. The same thing is the QVX. So QVD, it's both of these file systems are same, QVD or QVX. What is the difference? A QVD can be created only by QlikSense or Qlikview. So whichever product you're using, that means it can be created only by Qlik product, either QlikSense or Qlikview, and used only by QlikSense or Qlikview. So that's where the difference comes in. A QVX can be created by a third-party product. For example, Informatica. So Informatica is a ETL solution, right? So it attracts, transforms, loads data. So you can directly load it into a QVX file. So the advantage is you don't have to load it to a database, then extract it from a database. You can store it into QVX. Both these file systems are highly optimized. So when you load certain data from a database, it might take 10 minutes. The same data set, if you load it from QED or QVX, it might take fraction of a second, because that highly compressed and optimized queue and these file systems are when they work with QVF file system. So Qlik. The other file system that you would hear within the Qlik environment is a script file. QVS is nothing but a script file. It is purely a notepad file, right? So you can store script in it. The idea is reusable script or repetitive or common. All the common scripts, you can store it in a QVS file in one place. And since, like I mentioned, it's an app-based model in QlikSense, suppose you have 10 apps, but all the 10 apps have a certain logic which is pretty much common. So you can store it in one single script file where you could call this script into multiple apps, and tomorrow you have any change in the logic, you just have to change it in one place, and then it reflects across all the apps.
So QVF is the only one that uses the memory?
No, QVS is just a storage file. It's just like storing
the F, sorry, the F.
file.
F is in Frank. QVF is in Frank. Is the only one that uses the memory?
Yeah, QVF is the only one that uses memory.
And there's no way to change that, right? You can tell it to use SSD instead. It has to use the RAM, right?
No, it's a in-memory, right? So it always uses RAM. So SSD is just for storage, QVD and QVX. And as far as I know, SSD doesn't make a lot of difference unless you're reading and writing a lot, which in this scenario might not be the case. But yeah, SSD helps in QVX storing, reading data from QVX, QVD and QVX. But QVF is always going to be in memory.
I see. I see. So as far as Kyriba using QlikSense, do you think that we're going to be using the QVF file in memory?
Yeah, that's how you would be using QlikSense. Yeah.
I see. So if it's a lot of clients, get in this QlikSense module in Kyriba, then the Kyriba servers need to have a lot of memory to support it, right? I see.
Yes. That okay. So I think there are different methods to manage that also. So while the product is in memory, that's the power of the product, QlikSense. But over a period of time, QlikSense also has evolved as a product, and we have multiple methods to manage it. So one, as we go forward, you'll understand. So that's the thing that I would be covering and sharing. So not always you have to have memory. Not always you have to load the entire data set into memory. So yeah, we can discuss that.
Yes, sir.
All right. So like I was talking about, suppose you have a database DB. So we have QlikSense over here. And all you have to do is use QlikSense, create one QlikSense app, connect to the database and get data. So this is nothing but QVF. So I created one QVF, sales QVF. I connect to DB, I get all the tables. So basically tables required, create the data model in this file, right? So this data model is created by the script or the wizard that I would use. Then I publish this app.
So Azra, I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you connect to the database?
There are different connectors for that.
Give us an example.
Like for SQL, ODBC or OLEDB or any that source, any relational database can use ODBC. For Salesforce.com, there is a Salesforce connector. For SAP, there is a SAP connector. For Google Analytics or any web API,
Okay.
there
Okay. So any product.
service.
Okay. Any product that buys ClickSense will also have its own connector, right?
I didn't get it. Any product in the sense?
Like suppose Kariba wants to use ClickSense, so it will buy ClickSense, right? When it buys ClickSense, they also buy the connectivity for it, right? So not like an API.
Yeah, it's inbuilt in the product. You don't have to pay separately.
Okay, so suppose Kariba is taking it. I didn't acquire it yet, but when it takes it, will it have, because Kariba is cloud. Okay, Kariba is completely cloud. So will it have a connector like SAP and Salesforce, or should we do the traditional DB method of connecting?
See, all the connectors are free except for SAP. So, basis what kind of licensing you're buying from ClickSense?
It depends.
My
Okay.
understanding is, my understanding as of now is you would be going in for subscription, and subscription includes all the connectors from ClickSense, except for SAP. So SAP is a separate licensed connector.
Okay, I don't want to get into details of it. So yeah, okay, I can understand. You can go ahead, Azra.
Yeah. So all the connectors are pretty much inbuilt, and you can connect to any data source that is there. Now, once you have that, so basically the end users connect to it and access it through the browser.
Okay.
Right. So where is the RAM used? This is the application that the RAM is used. Is it the only way that we can use that we have to load all the data into RAM? No, not necessary. There are different methods of managing when we work with large data sets. Yes, the solution is in-memory capability. We can size it appropriately based on the requirement. So tomorrow, if your multiple customers get on ClickSense module in Kariba and there's a lot of data that is supposed to be managed, we can figure out the optimal architecture. So there are different architectures of managing data. One is going full-fledged in memory, 2 going with on-demand, 3 going with segmentation of data, 4 now that they have come up with ABDI, which is Associative Big Data Indexing Engine, wherein you can leave the data at rest and then have everything in memory as a reference, which will give the user the capability to be to experience the in-memory without bringing the entire data into RAM. So as the product has evolved, there are different methods. But I'm going through the basic, like what the basic premise of the product is. You have the database, you have a ClickSense file, connect to database, bring the data and load it. So this file goes into memory. Now, every time this file refreshes data from the DB, it actually reloads the same data again. That means it always does a full refresh. This is the in-memory challenge also, because it's in memory, it will always truncate the data and extract the data from the database. To mitigate this and reduce the number of queries that go to the database and be able to do incremental load. So that's where the QED platform comes into picture. So it's an intermediary platform. The advantage of this is nothing. This is more like a storage, which you can use it as a full-blown data warehousing or a DW kind of a requirement. So basically, you could bring in data here, store the data, which is in Qlik compressed proprietary format, and from there you can load it to your QlikSense or Qlikview or multiple apps that you have. So because you are bringing in QED, you can do incremental load over here. That means you can, yeah, I'm sure you know what incremental is. From the DB, you can bring X amount of data today and tomorrow X plus Y, or the Y that the new data set only.
Yes, we understand that.
And from this QEF, it will always do a reload, do a full reload from this thing. The advantage of bringing QED is tomorrow, if you're using the same data set in another application, you don't have to query the database. You can directly use it from the QED layer. Now, QED, because it's a storage format, it gives you a lot of flexibility to work with data and structure data as and how you want it. And you can do this. This is how you can. And users too. Any questions here? Or?
Of course, QVF is faster, right? Because of full refresh RAM, so it's fetching information much faster than in QED. QED is a little slower.
Okay, I don't. No, it's not that way. So it is basically QED is a storage format. It is definitely faster. So you extract data and store it in QED. So the speed component or the performance component for the end user or the deployment is nothing to do with QED. So QED does not come into that. It's just a storage. It stores data. QVF reads data from QED one time, refreshes it, and goes into the RAM, and that's it. So when this file is in the RAM, of course, this is the faster file because this is what users would be accessing for their analysis. So when the user is clicking anything, because it's already in the RAM, it's faster in nature. So that's where the entire user experience comes into picture, that the application is in the RAM and users are accessing, making selections, making clicks, and it is processing faster.
So QVF connects to QED?
Yeah, QE. So ultimately, QED plays like a role of a data source. So you have the database. From the database, we are bringing data into QED. QED, end of the day, is like a data source for QVF.
Got it. Yes, sir. Okay.
So every time it connects, suppose I schedule a reload of a QVF at 9 a.m. It will connect to, before 9 a.m. I would have refreshed my QED, so which would have got the most recent data from the database and stored in QED. So at 9 a.m. QVF will connect to QED, bring in the data, process data, and that's all. So then QED has no role till next 9 a.m. or then till the next refresh.
And what's the benefit of having a QVD? Why not just connect directly from QVF to the database?
We can do that. The idea is, suppose if, okay, let me explain this. Suppose there are 1 million records in your database and QVF connects to the database, gets this 1 million records. Now tomorrow there might be 100K records extra. So it might be 1.1 million. Now the challenge, or if you're okay, if the business is okay, if your database is faster in that way and you're okay with it, so the QEF will always do a full extract. That means every day it will extract the 1 million plus the new records. So day after tomorrow, 1 million plus.
I see. So QVD is only pulling the change data, incremental data, new data only. QVD is pulling. So then the RAM, the QVF only accesses that new data. So it's less load on the process, less load on the system. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
So basically, it's managing everything, right? The QED manages the thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So we just bring the 100K records from your transaction DB. We don't keep querying your transaction DB for the entire data set. So the QED will have the data over here of that 1.1 or 1.2. And the QVFs would be talking direct only to the QED. So even if they do a full refresh, they would be reading it to QED, which would be faster.
So, so QED
yeah.
plays a major role for the performance, right? Performance of the system, like the database. Actually, I used to do some projects in database. So when there is large data, like if it is not capable of handling that, like our system is not capable of handling that, so we are not able to. It takes some time to if you write some query, it takes some time to pull the data right from our system.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I
Yes.
understand.
Yeah. And QED, this QED layer, like I said, right, it can, so if your organization does not have a data warehouse, right, where you can store process data, so QED plays that role. You can create segmented QEDs over here and do the ETL. So I'll explain that.
Okay.
So as you move forward in your data requirement, so let's assume you have a lot of, so there's certain set of data processing that is required. So what you could do is you could create multiple levels of QED. So you can create one layer, let's say just one-to-one layer. This is my terminology, more than one. When I say one-to-one, when I say what I mean, this is.
I know one-to-one, one-to-many, and this thing. I know.
Okay, no, not that database. I'll tell you.
Not the
One-to-one
database.
is if you have a table in your database, so I create one QED for that table. Suppose I have 4 tables, I create 4 QEDs.
Okay.
So the one-to-one I mean is for every table in your database, I create one QED over here. Then I use it in QEF for my analysis. Or you could do, let's get rid of this one-to-one, not to confuse it. So for every table, I can create one QED. So this will be my QED layer 1. In a typical data warehousing environment, this is what you do, right? So you would create one-to-one tables. Then you can create table 9, table 10. These tables can be a combination of process data from these one-to-one tables, right? Or the plain Jane tables. So I can do joins. Suppose I have 2 transactional tables. I have processed the data. I can join these 3 tables, create a third table.
Okay.
So yeah, so I can create a multi-layer process
So
storage for
my
QED.
understanding is that like the table 1 and table, the table 9 can it can see if it is the same, like table 9 and table 1 data is the same, like the rows and columns matches. I mean, like the data matches, so it can pull that, right? It can use the same, right?
Yes, it can do that. Plus, it's process, right? Suppose you have certain data in four tables, but you want an aggregated view in a single table. You can do that. So that's the typical ETL, right? Extract transform. I'm talking about transformation. This is plain Jane vanilla extraction from your database. Now these 2 layers will act as a transformation layers. So I can create multiple these kind of layers, which will create a complete transformation of my data. And then in the end, I can just create a single app, which would give me.
So it relates each and every layer.
Yeah, you can use data from any layer.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Azra, does it synchronize back and forth or only forward? So would the data pull from first layer 1 go to layer 2 and back to layer 1 when after the QVF in the QVF file, basically in the user, if they enter information, does it update layer 3 and then layer 2 and then layer 1?
Yeah. When you say no, from the user, if the user is updating any data.
Yeah, like question is like it's a bidirectional or not. If it goes from from layer 1 to layer 2, and can it come from layer 2 to layer 1 again, like if there is any need of data?
See that if you're referring to something like this, so you want to create like this. See, layers are just a architectural concept. Not like we define any layers over there. It's just that storage QED. So if you're referring to something like this, yes, it is doable. Suppose you want one table 16 from using data from two QEDs in layer 2, which are processed. You can do that.
Okay.
But what we can't do is get data from the user and move it back forth to the tables.
Oh, we cannot. That's not possible. Okay.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
cannot
Yeah.
do that.
So once if it processes the data, that's done, right? So it cannot do again unless if we schedule that, right?
Yeah. So if you see, the question is processing data. Yes, whatever data is available, it can process. But I think the question was, can we accept any inputs from the user and pass it back to the tables?
Yes,
No,
that's
it is
my
not.
question. Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Okay,
it's
so
not.
it's one
So
direction.
it is only, it's one direction because, BI. You can customize a solution from where you could accept data from the user and do it, but that's a completely custom solution. So which you can probably bring it back in. Not you can, you can accept it, but this is a full-blown custom solution. This is not out of the box, and this is not the product forte also. So you might not be able to do a full-fledged deployment around this. Yes, if there is a certain requirement where you might want to accept some input from the end user, you can do that. That can be in a smaller chunk, but not in a larger methodology or application.
I see. So QlikSense and Qlikview, you're pulling information from the table from the data, and that's it. And then you're exporting out whatever on tables, on flows. Okay, gotcha. So the user is not inputting anything. Okay, to just customizing the views and extracting data. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Right. Yeah, Deepak, you had any question? I think you were telling something.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So ideally, you can schedule any of these things, and all of these can be on any trigger basis. So be it a time trigger or a event trigger. So whatever you choose, you can set up a trigger to start this process. Once this is completed, start this. Once this is done, start the third. And once all of these things are done, finally refresh the QVF. So based on your requirement, you can completely automate and set this up at different various schedules. So for the end user, he will have the data that he needs at the right point. All right. So just to understand, what exactly are you Kariba product does?
So it's basically a treasury management product. So we manage the treasure of all the companies, whoever subscribes to Kariba. So it's like cash reporting and cash analysis, bank management, also stuff. So it's mostly based on reports. So probably to have a better visualization and better understanding of reports, we would probably take ClickSense into consideration.
Okay.
It's mainly
Yeah, I see a lot of products doing that. So rather than building something from scratch, they've been using ClickSense to deliver analytics. Yeah, fair enough. I think.
yeah. So mostly cash forecasting and also stuff. So we need a good presentation part.
Okay. All right. Also, I mean, this is what I had for the demo session. So, as just to give you an idea of what the curriculum can be, is just bring in the curriculum.
I see. So quick question. So in the QVD files, the QVD, how do you set up the tables in them? Through ClickSense, through the ClickSense menus? So,
Okay, so that's okay. I'll let me talk about that. Give me a second.
Sure.
Okay, so that was the part that is slightly confusing. So I thought I'll do that in the next session. But since the question is asked, so like I said, in ClickSense, whatever you work with a QVF file. So of course, there's no setting or mechanism to create QVDs or anything. So you use a script file at every given point of time. So that is nothing but a QVF file. So there would be a QVF file which would extract data from the database, store it to layer 1. There would be a second QVF file which would, from the layer 1, process all the data and store it into layer 2. Then you have the layer 3, right? None of these things are a rigid mechanism or a definition. These are concepts that are created by developers. So let me be honest. This is not something as a product you get that, okay, you can define layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. It is a concept that you can follow where you can have one layer, one QVF, which will create all the QVDs, first level QVDs, then one QVF, which will create next level QVDs. So what flexibility you have is you're not limited to 3 layers. Tomorrow you have 4, 5, whatever number of aggregations, however you want to structure your QVDs. So end of the day, QVD is nothing but a storage layer, right? So you can store data. Maybe today you decide to store data as a segment level. That means if one QVD for every customer, you can do that. Tomorrow you might think, okay, I'll split the QVDs for one customer at a time level. That means every year one QVD. You can do that. Then you might think that, okay, for every customer, let me split the data into detail and aggregated view. So you can create one aggregated QVD with all the aggregated data and one transactional QVD which will have all the transactional level data. So you have complete flexibility as to how you can manage your QVDs. And all of these things are not managed by a console. These are purely by QVF and how you can control them. This is the slightly confusing bit, but when we start working, we'll have more clarity and as to how and what. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. So, well, like we were mentioning earlier, what Qlikview does, it's bank statements. So bank statements that have the client information in it, right? The client bank reporting, the prior day and current day information, and also the payment flows, right? And they're gonna have account analysis. So I'm thinking how that's gonna be. We're gonna be pulling that information from the system, and then outputting in our ClickSense.
Yeah. So if the data is quite low at the aggregated level, we can always skip the QED intermediate level too. And there are a couple of other methods that are running in ClickSense which can optimize your hardware infrastructure and deploy the solution for your end users. Yeah, I think as we go through the entire training session, right, you'll have enough thought process around these things, how to manage and what you could probably do.
Understood. And to give you some background, so we're going to be doing the implementation part of it, right? So we're going to be training the client basically on the ClickSense when we get through ClickSense and how to use it on the UI, the user interface, right? We're not going to be dealing with so much as the back end of it. So as far as storage and that, but it's good to understand it, of course. So if anything goes wrong, we know how to troubleshoot it. So we see them. Yes, sir.
So I've split the training into two parts. One is the developer part, which is basically you'd be connecting to data sources, bringing the data, creating a data model, transforming the data, like anything to do with data. And then the second level is the designer, is the UI level, where you create the charts, graphs, and manage those charts and graphs. So this is more, like you rightly said, it is more towards the front-end development. So there's a different training for that backend, the storage mechanism, all of those things. That's the ClickSense administration. which takes care of the server. So that's a separate training session. But in this training, we would be covering completely from development to creating an application or a dashboard.
So Azra, we are mainly, I know that you already know this, but then we are mainly focusing on the business analyst certification. So, so what are the main topics that are there in that syllabus? We would like to make focus on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Business analyst is basically understanding your end user requirements and converting it into technical requirements. That's mainly that is. So yeah, this training will definitely help you understand the entire front end product, so that when you get requirements, you can convert it to your ClickSense requirements. So when somebody asks or requests a certain capability or feature, you will know that okay, whether it's doable or not.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying we don't want to have knowledge of such stuff, but my main focus would be to get certified in business analyst module. So
Sure.
yeah.
So Azra, when you say in a different training, this means that we're not going to cover it in this training. When you say different training, it's for the UI and for the business analyst for the certification. You say there's a different training that you provide?
No. What I meant is, the developer and the business analyst is in this training that we are going to do. So that I split it up into two parts. One is developer and one is designer. So both will cover all of these things. What I said as a separate training is this ClickSense system administration. That is a different training.
I see.
That's not part of this training.
Okay, that which we know, which we do not need to know, right? The admin part,
Exactly.
like
Yes.
business analyst, yeah.
Yes. You would not need to know as a business analyst. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just trying to be clear because generally half the session people start expecting system administration question. So that's why I'm trying to be clear. That's a separate training, but yeah, your business analyst and developer is included in this training.
Yeah. Anyways, we don't need that. We don't need admin part. Right, Abdul?
Okay.
We don't need, right? The admin.
Just business, just business, yeah, but just business intelligence, the business analyst part, right? Just the business analyst part to do the certification, and of course to be able to intelligently train the client on the UI part of it, and to understand where the file is being imported from, and slightly the back end of it. But in the end, we want to be independent, and we can implement a full-blown ClickSense implementation using the user interface, training the client and understanding their needs, as well, of course, and the number one priority here is passing the certification, passing the ClickSense Business Analyst certification.
Okay, got it.
We'll
So
take care of that.
Azra, I have a question. So can you give me like a high level definitions, like what business analysts do in ClickSense? Like what he does usually, like basically like creating the charts, or for example, like if you can give me an example, that will be great.
Yeah, so there are two roles business analyst plays. One is like understanding the requirements and converting it into requirements in ClickSense so that the developer can bring in the right data set and do it. And a couple of organizations also expect business analysts to create the front end UIs, like creating charts, graphs, KPIs, right? So mostly the designer level kind of requirements. But when you work with ClickSense as a business analyst also, you need to know, like, okay, if there is a certain requirement and that requirement needs a certain data set, so where the data, how, like, would that data set be, would you be able to bring it in Qlik? Once you bring it, what kind of data model you can create, then what kind of front-end charts that you could present to the end user. So those kind of roles. In a ClickSense environment, it's not very clearly defined. So that's what I have seen in organizations as a business analyst. So generally, people develop into multiple capabilities in the organization. But a pure business analyst, of course, is who can understand the requirements from the business users, understand whether it's doable in Qlik, to understand doable, he needs to know some part of Qlik, and then convert them into actually technical requirements. So when I say technical, okay, when you got, so certain people say, okay, I want to see cash flow analysis. So you need to understand from the business user what kind of analysis they're looking for, what are the KPIs they're looking for, what are the charts and graphs, where is the data, what are the data sets that are required. Then you convert them into technical requirements and give it to the business developer and get it, the QlikSense developer and get it developed. So that would be a primary role. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Thank you so much, Azra. We appreciate it.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
That's cool. So this is what I had for today. I think once we start off, we'll go through all the other topics step by step, and things will be much clearer.
Okay, so we just want to talk about the timings. So which time, would you be able to assist us? Like in the mornings, like 6:30, right? You told me 6:30, right?
Yeah, that same time that we joined today.
Okay.
We started today. Yeah.
And this is Monday through, okay, so it's Monday through Friday Eastern, right? It would be Monday through Friday?
Yeah, Monday to Friday.
I see. And it's going to be the same time every day. And then in case we miss a course, right, it's going to be recorded and then placed on a shared drive, right?
Yeah, all the sessions will be recorded irrespective. So every day it would be recorded and placed on a shared drive. Yeah. So if you miss it, you can refer to that. Or even in future you want to refer it, you can refer back to that recorded session.
I see. And in regards to homework, will be giving us any homework to do, or everything will be covered in the course while we're in class?
Yeah. In 1 hour, there's not much that I can I would be able to take you through topics. So the idea is I'll take you through a couple of topics in a day, right? So the expectation is you'd go back and practice that, and the next day we could discuss if you have any challenges. So within 1 hour, like both of us doing it would be challenge and a little. It gets derailed. So the way I would suggest is I would take you through topics like 4 to 5 topics in a day, demonstrate everything. Of course, the same data set, I would share it with you. So the idea is you would practice it later and make sure you understand the concept. If you have any challenge, we can discuss it the next day.
Okay, so my understanding is that you will be giving us some assignments on a daily basis, right?
Yeah. Whatever I do during the class session, the expectation is you practice it again. So that would be your work assignment.
Okay, got it.
I see. Thank you.
And also, I heard that like you will be giving us a project when we complete this course, right? Yeah. And you will be assisting.
Head of it, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Azra.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Deepak.
All right. Yeah. I think any questions, Andy and Abdul? Maybe we can.
All set.